Welcome to the Bias Buzz, powered by Accuracy Media. I'm Don Irvine, and he's Brian McDickle. Welcome back, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to get right to this. The Wisconsin primary results yesterday. The race continues to move along. Interesting. A lot of people in the news were talking about this being an upset victory for Cruz, though the polling, I think, clearly showed that he was probably going to win. I think it's an upset from the standpoint of you've got, it's Trump that's the front runner, and he didn't win, and he lost by a pretty good margin. But on the other hand, Cruz has been winning a few, so I'm not sure it's a major upset. I kind of figured he'd win Wisconsin.
Right, I figured he would. This poll showed there. Also, although Trump tweeted out a poll yesterday morning that showed him with an 11-point lead. So, and one of my liberal friends says that's an outlier. We're so deep into this that you don't even see the obvious outliers anymore, and I think that's true. It was, I don't know where Trump got this poll, but he survives on, we kept talking about like what it would take to bring him down, right? Saying whatever about John McCain, didn't do it. Rosie O'Donnell didn't do it. All these things that didn't do it. What brings him down is how he reacts to losing. I mean, his statement last night was, totally unpresidential, definitely sore loser. It's starting to sink into them that they may not be able to get the ball over the goal line.
Yeah, I think it definitely is sinking into them. I mean, that statement last night, when you start talking about your opponent in a statement like that and saying, lying Ted Cruz and the Governor Scott Walker and, blaming the RNC for you basically setting this up to rig it to make sure to deny him the nomination, those are all very sore loser comments. And as you said, it isn't very presidential, though on the other hand, what did Trump say earlier in the week? Or, says that, if acting presidential would be boring.
Right. But what's denying him the nomination is voters of all across all the demographic groups, groups that had previously been with Trump and other states have been with Trump. And also, like of the states that border Wisconsin, nobody support. Trump got about what he got in Wisconsin about what he got in Iowa and about what he got in Minnesota. But Cruz got way more in Wisconsin than he had been getting in the neighboring states.
Yeah, right, and it looks like he was picking up some places, some demographic groups that he'd been kind of struggling with earlier, so maybe some of the momentum's going on there. It's still also hard to tell at this stage, whether or not we're seeing a real coalescing of the never Trumps or the anti-Trumps, and they're saying, okay, we've got three candidates, but Kasich really has no mathematical path, so we're discounting him, and he did very poorly there. And I was reading, it says, according to the exit polls, 54% of people who voted in the Republican primary on Tuesday believed that Trump had run the most unfair campaign of any GOP contender. And a startling 38% said that he would be scared if he ultimately became president. So those things are starting to sink into the voters, too, that the things that Trump is saying may actually start having a negative effect. Before, earlier in the campaign, it didn't seem to matter what he said. It just bounced right off of him.
Right, that's true. It's like we're getting to the stage where we're choosing this on fairly traditional grounds, right? Qualifications for the job, temperament. Where do you stand on the issues? The quaint notion the issues matter, right? And people are starting to say he doesn't really have a coherent view. It's like it springs from, what he said, like we talked about the last time I was here. There are qualifications for the job of politician, right? You can't wing that any more than you can wing any other major professional accomplishment like that. And people are finding out that he's winging it, and he doesn't know to ask for help. He makes mistakes that could be avoided.
Right, and he's also getting upset, or his people are getting upset, the supporters are getting upset that the Cruz campaign has got this tremendous ground game, and they're really working on wooing the delegates. So really, the net effect last night was minimal in terms of numbers. Cruz basically gained 30 delegates net on Trump, so that draws him a little closer. The math still says Trump needs about 57%, Cruz needs 86% to get the nomination, but every time, Cruz dings him on this and gets, can delegate him, I guess, in essence, he slows Trump's ability to get to that 1237. Fox News this morning ran one scenario where they figured he'd get 1196, so he'd fall short. But, if the Cruz people are out there working, these delegates and working on the unbound delegates and things like that, I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, this is politics. There's going to be a lot of things going on here. This is a very unusual campaign. Trump hasn't put really anything into a ground game. And he may lose because, just on that basis that he hasn't really concentrated on that. He's been focusing on the bigger things. But, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here.
And, what does that show you? Cruz is expertly managing a huge enterprise, right? A far-flung campaign. He is at the grassroots turn out the vote. He's at the grassroots delegate wooing, so forth. He knows there are people know the rules. They know how to exploit the rules. Trump they're like, oh, yeah, we're knocked around. We better get somebody for that. They hired Paul Manafort this week. We better get somebody who understands this stuff, because before you didn't have something. You didn't have someone who understood it.
Right. And for the rules, I mean, there'll be a rules committee meeting before the convention, before the RNC convention, National Convention in July, and that will set the rules for that convention. You can look at what happened in 2012 in terms of what the rules were, but they're not bound by those rules. There's some of those rules may still take effect, but there could be, with regard to how the nomination process goes and who that could change, because this is such a different ball game. People are looking at 2012. There may be a completely different set of rules on how this works.
That's right. But what I don't think is that you can airlift a candidate in. I don't think you can bring in a Paul Ryan. I don't think you can figure out some way to give it to Kasich if he's a distant third in the voting. I think it's going to be Trump or Cruz, and that's a horse race all the way to the end.
Yeah, I mean, and Kasich thinks that he's got a shot at this. I guess that's why he keeps staying in there. But it's kind of a ridiculous notion that to bring in another candidate. It's got to be one of these two guys, I think, down the line.
Right.
Whether or not you like Trump or like Cruz or whatever, I think you have to stick with one of these two guys. You cannot bring another person in on this at this stage.
You can't disenfranchise your entire party.
All right, so let's talk just really briefly about Hillary and Bernie. This is getting to be a little bit more of a heated race in the sense of the rhetoric, the charges flying back and forth. Hillary still has got a very clear path to nomination because of the proportional delegate system. She's still racking up delegates even when she loses, so she's inching closer, and she still has the super delegates behind her for the most part. So it's pretty hard to see Bernie winning it based on that. But Hillary's definitely feeling the heat, and she's not happy with Bernie.
She's not happy with Bernie, and he is raising a ton of money. There's no reason for him to drop out. Right, because he is pulling the party to the left, and they're doing what we do on our side a lot. They are making her defend things to win the primaries that are going to be hard to answer for in the general. Now, like for instance, trade. Now, to be a serious Democratic candidate for president, you have to be completely anti-trade. They're going to be climbing over each other to see how anti-trade they can be. You can't run for president like that. The people who invest in the country are not going to. They're horrified at this thing. And the other thing is, I saw a thing this morning on Middle Eastern media where they're like, those of you who want to see a liberal president in the United States, you have to really fear Hillary because she's a warmonger. We don't think of her as a warmonger, but they built this record, and it's interesting that they attack her that way. Could foreshadow stuff you see here.
Yeah, so here's something that came up I found this morning that was interesting about how she performed against Bernie on this. Among age voters 29 and under, Clinton won just 18% to Sanders' 81%. From those in the 30 to 44 age bracket, she lost by a 2-to-1 margin. Now, Bernie definitely is attracting this younger group, the millennials plus, to his message. Socialism is selling in the Democratic Party, at least for these people, but they are definitely far left. And Hillary has said that she's not sure that Bernie's a Democrat, and I don't think anybody thinks that Bernie's really a Democrat. I mean, he's a vowed socialist. He just needs a ticket to run under, and he couldn't run as an independent socialist. That wouldn't have worked. But even if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, which is highly unlikely, I'm just not convinced that Hillary can win back this younger set of voters. That they're going to be kind of lost. Hillary just doesn't connect with them.
The only thing she's ever done in the polls is go down. She opened against Rick Lazio with a huge lead, and he almost caught her, despite being one of the most inept U.S. Senate candidates of modern times. Against Obama, she blew a huge lead. she went from 51% ahead of Sanders to even. The other interesting thing is, I read the other day, 36% of Republicans say they could never vote for Trump. 34% of Democrats say they could never vote for Hillary.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
That's
yeah.
a wash, basically.
Yeah, and that's okay. So that makes the case that, I mean, even if you look at the polling that's being done, the head-to-head, the Clinton versus Trump, the Clinton versus Cruz, Sanders versus all these different machinations, that if you take that into account, yeah, it's basically a wash. So it could, Trump could beat Hillary. I mean, and so could Cruz, if that's going to be the case. Another story that came up this past week, and it plays also into the Democratic race as well, is the $15 minimum wage that is now being enacted in California. New York is following suit. What I think is interesting about this is that Governor Brown in California was against this at the beginning of the whole thing, and he basically bowed to union pressure for this. And even today, the Washington Post, because D.C. is trying to put this into effect as well, it's just becoming this little plague going around the country, that they even said that this was bad. Now, it was a little bit of a half editorial in some ways, but when the liberals are starting to question, like, okay, we wanted a fair wage and a living wage for people, but $15 is a little bit steep because of what it does. And one of Brown's contentions was that he said it was going to add a huge amount of money, $250 million or some kind of, whatever the figure was, to the state budget. So it was going to affect the state budget. And he knew that how hard that was for the state. What's the effect of that? Probably higher taxes or higher fees.
Right, and I think what they have decided is 15 that's too much too fast. Wages are tied to productivity. You can't just declare productivity doubled. McDonald's is about as productive as it can be. You order a hamburger, they give it to you in 41 seconds or whatever it is, right? It's hard to beat that. So are you going to give it to me in 21 seconds? Because otherwise, there's not value to what it's not commensurate. So the business decision will be, that much of an increase, it's going to be to lay off massive amounts of people. That's what's happened everywhere else that they have done this 15. Massive amounts of layoff, small businesses closing because they can't, you cannot double that line item in your budget. You run a small business, you know that.
Right, right. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if Maryland enacts this, Montgomery County, and there is a proposal to do that, that has a severe impact on organizations like ours, that in terms of what happens there. The thing, too, is that, it's always kind of bothered me about the whole minimum wage thing is that, the unions, the liberal politicians, they're treating this as if that, the minimum wage jobs are supposed to be jobs that people are supposed to make careers out of. And that was never really the intent. I mean, I had minimum wage jobs when I was a kid, or when I was a teenager. I think the minimum wage when I was a teenager was like $2.65, and you think about that now and you think, like, how can anybody do that? Well, I was a teenager, I was living at home, but it wasn't meant, it was meant to help train me and help me learn something. Right. I wasn't going to make a career out of doing the things I was doing at the minimum wage. You should aspire to more than that.
Right. I remember President Obama brought in a woman and her son from Kentucky or somewhere who had been working in the same McDonald's for 25 years. And it's like, the idea is not to be a fry cook at McDonald's for 25 years. We just should not. The thing about it is, we shouldn't fund that. We should not support that financially because, as you say, the thing is to encourage people to do more than be a fry cook at McDonald's for 25 years. To say, hey, I need more and I can get more and I can get it out of myself. I mean, that's how society advances. That's how you reduce poverty.
Right, and most of these places that have minimum wage jobs, like the fast food industry, they know that the staff that they get is probably not going to be there that long. There'll be a few that'll stick around. 25 years is a long time, especially if you're staying, as a fry cook on the line or something like that, and not moving up to manager and then trying to be trained to even maybe own a franchise. There are a lot of franchise owners that had formerly been cooking hamburgers and making French fries and stuff like that. And that's great. Those are great stories. I mean, that's America. That's what we should be doing. But if you're just sticking around and that's all and you're just complaining, I've been working at McDonald's for 20 years, making $7.50, $8.25, $8.50, $9. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that. That's not the way the system was supposed to work.
Right. And the thing about it is, if you don't want an $8 an hour job, don't take an $8 an hour job.
Right. Nobody's put a gun to your head to say, go, you have to take this job.
That's right.
And there've been plenty of times when I've passed by my local fast food joints and I've seen signs like help wanted, and they stay there for a while because they can't find enough help at times. So, if and when the economy improves, that kind of thing may fall into play. And the market will take care of that too, is that if the market says that, these guys need to get paid $10 or $11 an hour, $12 an hour, to be attracted to that job, then that's what it'll be, because the market will say that'll happen. But when there's a lot of people looking for jobs, so it kind of drops down a little bit. That's all free market stuff.
That's right. It's like there's a Walmart in North Dakota. The North Dakota, the Bakken oil fields, western North Dakota, one of the most isolated parts of the country. All of a sudden, there are towns and wealth and lots of people working. So the Walmart there pays $28 an hour. Why? Because they have to. It has to. That's the way markets work. And those are pass-through jobs. What you're learning at McDonald's has 400% annual turnover. 400%. They replace every employee 4 times every year. And they count on that. But what they're doing is they're teaching people how to be workers.
Right.
Which is how to show up on time, how to respond when the boss gets mad, how to make sure your job is done before you leave. All those little skills that you think that we're not born to those skills. You have to be taught.
Yeah, you got to learn something somewhere, and that kind of turnover means is that there are costs that the businesses is bearing as they have to continue to retrain and train new people all the time. So there's a lot of factors. People just they have a kind of a black and white vision of how things should work, and it's much more complex when you're running a small business than what most people think about.
That's right.
Just real quickly, I thought, just as an aside, I thought was kind of funny, the CNN offices out in L.A. were picketed by some Bernie supporters. They called it Occupy CNN. They were complaining about the lack of coverage or the unfair coverage of Bernie Sanders. But I don't know. I mean, I think Bernie Sanders is getting plenty of airtime.
I don't think any of these guys are lacking for airtime.
Yeah, I mean, that's the media is all over these guys, and Sanders provides a lot of interesting entertainment and sometimes fodder for the things, and he attracts. He attracts decently large crowds, definitely larger than Hillary. So, there's something to be said for that. These people are definitely just wrong-headed, but maybe it's just the former occupiers haven't figured out what they've been doing for the last few years, and they think, oh, let's just do this for the heck of it.
Right. It's a certain kind of critique, though, that there's something new there. There is something that, and the thing is, Bernie is this champion of the people and whatnot. He is a dirty trickster from the old school, right? He's done this. He's done stuff that, the Bernie Bros, things they write about Hillary. Trump's people say that the trouble in Chicago, those people were all paid by Bernie to make trouble. I don't know if it's true, but that's what they claim. But the claim is out there that he, in addition to being a champion of the poor, he is also a dirty trickster.
Well, we're going to switch to our end the segment here, or end the show here with a couple of sports things. Let's talk really briefly about the title game for the NCAA tournament. It was a heck of a game. I will admit that I only stay up to a certain point in time, and then I go to bed because I get up early in the morning. So, I wake up and I just see this incredible last 5 to 7 seconds. My bracket was long busted. Villanova, wow, heck of a finish. They eviscerated Oklahoma, and then to beat North Carolina like that. But, how do you feel if you're Marcus Page? You make this unbelievable three-point shot, double clutch, everything like that. You think you're going to go into OT, and then, Villanova comes down there and sinks a buzzer beater, to beat you. And I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's one of the greatest moments in college basketball history.
We sit and watch these games, and my wife will tell you I scream about this all the time. They're coming to the end of the clock. The guy will, they'll dribble down to 6, and then they start. Well, then if you do anything wrong, you're not going to score, right? So 6 is not enough time. I say go with 10. You mess up, you might get a rebound, and if you score quickly, guys going coast to coast with 4 seconds left doesn't really happen much. You don't get a good shot. something goes wrong. You don't get beat like that much. But this time they went early, and I'm like, yay, Carolina, go early. Carolina had awful luck this whole game. Balls rimming out on them. Finally played 4 minutes of good basketball to get back in it, right? They get to the end of it. They make this thing to get overtime. You have to figure the momentum's all with them, right? And they do the right thing by my percentages, and they get beat like that. And it's a play, the two guys crossed. You can't guard against it. The only thing you can do is foul, which you'd have lost it anyway. I mean, it was just fabulous. The Montgomery County guy, sank that shot.
Yeah. So I mean, it's good for the DMV in terms of the winner on that, and my personal feeling too is that I think it's good for Villanova. Good for Jay Wright to get that. I remember, when Raleigh Massimino won the title back in '85. Those are great moments. They provide great basketball.
That was an unbelievable game.
That was an unbelievable game too. So Villanova's got 2 championships in 2 pretty remarkable games that people will not likely to forget anytime soon.
They shot 77% in Raleigh's game. Think about that, 77% in a national championship game.
Yeah.
And if they shoot 76, they lose.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. So now it's baseball season. I just want to address that. I think a lot of us have been waiting a long time for that. Nationals have retooled, a lot of new faces on the team, and they got the first game under their belt, and they come from behind extra inning victory over the Braves. So I'm happy about that. Thoughts about the way Daniel Murphy got the offense we were expecting from him, and Bryce was his usual monstrous self with a home run. That was good. Scherzer looked pretty good. Thoughts?
You know what? I love their chances for 2 reasons. One is they had a lot of guys last year who had off years. Gio, Strasburg, Worth, quite a few people who are now healthy. Wilson Ramos, who now have a chance to, follow a bad year with a good year. And also, the Mets. What did the Mets do? They stepped over 3 of the worst teams in baseball, and the Nationals collapsed for them.
Right.
The Braves, Phillies. It's a weak division. And Marlins. It's a totally winnable division. All you have to do is reverse your results with the Mets, and you're in the playoffs.
Right, and the Mets surged, and they did play some weak teams as the Nationals faded. So, all those little factors come into play, and the Nationals were definitely not healthy with a lot of their key players. So if they stay healthy in the way they look this year,
toxic clubhouse.
Right. And Ramos had LASIK surgery, so apparently he's seeing the ball a heck of a lot better, and that would be good because we know he can hit.
Right.
He just didn't perform all that well last year, and he's a good defensive catcher overall. So yeah, the team is definitely going to push the Mets. I'm not convinced the Mets, are their team built to do this and repeat again.
Right. I don't think they own the division by any means. Good young pitchers, but the good young pitchers, as we found out last year, have a tendency to take a step back. Harvey's start yesterday he wasn't special. He can be special. He probably will be, but would it be a total stunner if those 3 top DeGrom, Syndergaard, Harvey were, instead of A+ guys this year, they were B+ guys this year? And is that enough? That may be enough. If we go from B+ back to A+.
Right. All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. It's a 162 game season, and the Nationals play game number 2 today, I think. Yep. Right. Yep. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us again, and I want to thank Spencer Irvine as our engineer, and Stephen Irvine, who will do the post-production work. Also, we didn't do Periscope this week, but we'll get back on it next week. And please follow us at Accuracy Media on Twitter, like our Facebook page. You can follow me as well on Twitter and just stay tuned until next week, and we'll have a lot more interesting stuff. All right, see you then.